Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Tango Banter. I am Elizaveta. We have a fun topic at hand today, and before we launch into that, I wanted to let you know that next week, on Tuesday, December 13th, I'm doing a free seminar called 5 Things All Dancers Need to Know About Tango Music to Get Better Dances. So if you resonate with this topic, if you'd like to know a little bit more about what is it that you really need to know as a social dancer to do well. So it's not necessarily academic things that you need to know for the purpose of knowing more about the music so you can talk about it, but really what are the essential nuggets that are most useful for you to understand so that you have a better time at the Milonga. So the seminar will run from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. It's free to sign up for, so you can go ahead and check it out. The link is in the show notes below, and I'd love to connect with you. Hopefully you can join live, and if you can't, there will be a recording available, so you can go ahead and still sign up, and you'll have access to the recording after the seminar. Okay, so today we're talking about breakups. Breakups, both in a romantic sense and lesser breakups that would be between friends, for example, or just on the social dance floor. It might be breakups of someone you dance with and then you don't dance with them anymore. I don't know what to actually call that kind of breakup, but there's a whole range of them, and there's also a whole range of dealing with them. And because they're such a integral part of tango experience and life experience, I talk a lot about it, both in the more casual setting at a milonga or with friends or online. So last month we discussed this in our private group. What are some of the experiences people are having with breakups and how they deal with them? Because as we all know, there's no one answer to this. And there were some really interesting insights that came of those discussions, which reminds me, if you still have not joined my private Facebook group and you would like to participate in these discussions, I'm also including the link to that in the show notes below. Would love to have you in our group and hear your stories as well. Anyway, so I first want to talk a little bit about what I mean by breakups and how they manifest in our lives, both on the dance floor and off the dance floor, because a lot of times, as we all know, tango, or what happens on the social dance floor, is just a reflection of our lives. Then I want to talk a bit about strategies of what people typically do in these situations. How do they get over it, get through it? How do they decide what the right thing to do is? Because sometimes it's not very clear cut, right? And then I want to just suggest or propose some ways we can use the wisdom that we have from these stories and these insights to decide how to prepare ourselves for things like that, because it's going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen, not necessarily to the extreme of a romantic breakup, but if you spend time in the world of tango and you dance a lot and you are part of the community for years, you'll go through cycles of connecting with people and then disconnecting with people. And it just kind of continues to happen. So we might as well perhaps have a sense of what to do for ourselves. And that's going to be the goal of this episode, is provide some practical tools we can use to get back to feeling empowered. Because ultimately, as I'm going to remind you again and again, the goal of any decision that we make is best served to us if we make this decision out of a place of wanting to reclaim our power and come back to a state where we feel good about who we are and what's going on in our lives. So that's our intention always. So I'll keep coming back to that. Okay, so in terms of breakups, I think there is definitely a huge range of what I would consider breakups. And the reason why I'm calling it all breakups is because the emotions that we feel a lot of times are very similar. Whether you're breaking up with a lover or you're breaking up with a best friend, sure, they're not as intense. It's definitely, the intensity is not there. The degree is much lower with somebody like who's a friend versus a romantic partner. However, the actual emotion, it's very similar. There's still that sense of disappointment. There's that sense of betrayal, anger, and a lot of times there's a sense of melancholy or almost a perpetual sadness about not understanding what went wrong and sort of looking back and not getting a clear sense of why did it happen. Sometimes we have that closure and we can move on and we can transform the relationship, but sometimes the worst kind of breakup, right? I mean, tell me if there's a worse one, but to me, the worst kind of breakup is when it's sudden, you don't really know why, and there's no resolution. Man, those are the hardest ones, and I don't think anybody's spared that experience. If you are, you probably have a very small group of people you interact with, but people inside Tango and people outside of Tango have shared stories with me, and I've heard enough of these stories that I'm starting to think that it really is something that happens to everyone, where somebody might be really close. You have a really close friend and you're inseparable for like years or months or however long, but you feel really close to this person. You feel like they're a soulmate on some level, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And frequently there's no conversation afterwards. There's like a complete meltdown of some kind, and I know I have close friends who've described these experiences to me, and they're so traumatic. It's so hard to move on from that and not feel some sort of inadequacy or regret or fear of it happening again. So those are the hardest ones to deal with. And of course, if the partner or the person that you're breaking away from is more than just a close friend, if they're a romantic partner, a lover, a husband, a wife, a long-term partner, those breakups really are sort of the worst. I think if there's cheating involved, at least there's a reason. At least there's a way that we can sort of say, okay, well, it happened, and there's a culprit, and you can point your finger to it and be like, wow, that's bad. But when it happens with no reason, that's haunts you. It haunts you. And so on a very a much lesser scale, you'll experience that on the tango dance floor. It will take form sometimes as a disconnection just in terms of dance itself. Somebody likes to dance with you, and then somebody does not like to dance with you. And you have no reason to look to. You have no explanation. And in those times, I think those are perhaps the best lessons about yourself that you can experience, because what comes up in your mind in the absence of a legitimate explanation is a reflection of you and your relationship with yourself. So anytime that you are in that state and you start thinking, oh, it must be my fault, I did something wrong, I'm not good enough, I'm not a good enough dancer, my technique sucks, I have more things to work on. That language, that's a reflection of yourself. But if you choose to think, oh, well, that person's in a funk and it's their loss, and yeah, it hurts, but hey, to each his own, like that's a reflection of a different type of inner state, inner dialogue. And just in terms of how one sounds next to the other, you can tell where the power lies, right? Where is the power? That's the question we want to ask. So within social tango world, within the milonga and the community, you'll have those instances where it'll be just in terms of the dance. Somebody dances with you and then they don't dance with you. Then the next level up would be a friend, somebody you connect with, you become friends with, and you're close, and you do things together, you travel, you hang out, go out to eat, you know their family, they know your family, and then something happens and there is a breakup, and you have that thing to deal with of whether you want to be around them in the same space, or are you going to dance with them or not. Like that's like another very, very uncomfortable situation. And so then from there, the extreme would be a romantic relationship that forms through tango. And of those, of course, the worst would be that you fall in love with someone deeply. Maybe you're with them for a few years. Maybe you get married and you have a thriving relationship that then somehow falls apart. And there is separation, divorce. And then there is that negotiation of what are you going to do? Are you going to be around this person? Are you going to dance with them? And that kind of narrative happens quite a bit in tango. It happens within the circles of social dancers. It also happens in the professional circles, because have you noticed that most performing couples are also romantic partners? I feel like that's an interesting phenomenon that we take for granted. And anybody who's had a relationship at tango knows that just to have a relationship in tango and remain healthy and balanced and have a good one, like it requires a lot of work. And I've done an episode on this because I myself I'm in a relationship with somebody I met in tango, so I know the work that's required. So to do that on a professional level as well, we are professional partners as well as romantic partners, is a whole other layer of complexity that I dipped my toe into for a hot second and said no thank you. And I'm definitely of the mindset that I want to keep those two things separate. But within the professional world even, we've seen very dramatic breakups happen between professional dancers who had a whole career and their whole brand was built on their partnership. And then there's this very public and dramatic breakup that then results in this weird thing that happens afterwards, where most of the time the male, the guy, will get another partner and will continue his career, and the female dancer has quite a bit of challenge to overcome, because without a partner she has to find another partner of her level. So it's much harder, and it creates like ripple effects on many levels that are really interesting to ponder. Sometimes they are also very frustrating, because there's definitely an inequality of experience that happens for men versus women. And I think there can be a whole separate episode just on that gender dynamic, because it is more challenging for women than men a lot of times to rebound, to find their stride again. And there's different reasons for that I'm not really going to dive into now, because I know I can get lost in that. So let's just say we're dealing with this range of possibilities. And of course, there are many types of strategies to deal with those situations. On the one hand, there can be a very dramatic strategy where you cut everything off and move away from the community, which I've done. I moved from Dallas, Texas, where I had been in a relationship with my first relationship within Tango. We were together for 4 years, and when we broke up, I really could not imagine being in the same city with him, especially since our circles of friends overlapped quite a bit, and we just shared too much in terms of our social interaction. And then I was a pretty young tango dancer, so the thought of seeing him dancing with other women and then flirting with them, and it was too much. I couldn't do it. I had other reasons for leaving Dallas. There were other ambitions I had, but this was a huge contributing factor to me leaving at the time that I did. So that was pretty dramatic, and I've done other dramatic things like this, and maybe not so much like this, but that represents to me one end of the spectrum of a strategy that we can have, just sort of pull away, push away, go away, leave, move to a different place, start all over, start from scratch, and just kind of start from a clean slate. On the other hand is another strategy where you suck it up and you pretend like nothing happened. Like you're not even aware of there being a problem. You dance with the person, you still say hello, you remain friends with them. Somehow you get through the emotional side of it, and you sort of have a continuous relationship with them that just changes form. So you go from being romantic partners to being friends. Or, maybe if you're not dealing with something as dramatic as a relationship in a romantic sense, maybe it's a friendship, it still is sort of the same structure. You either never talk to this person again, never dance with them, or you just allow the relationship to shift and become something different. But you still dance with them, you still interact with them, maybe on occasion. Anyway, you get the point. There's a range there. And I think that it's natural for us to look for what is the appropriate thing to do. What is the thing that I'm supposed to do right now? What is the right thing to do? Those are the questions we ask a lot. And a lot of our turmoil, I think, has to do with being caught off guard and not knowing what is it that we're supposed to do in the moment, how to make ourselves feel better, how to feel that we're not losers. And especially, that crippling feeling when that person broke up with you and then you see them sort of flirting with someone else right in front of you. Like that never feels good, And the turmoil is real. On that one hand, we want to act out. We want to make it really dramatic. Another strategy, right? Maybe you don't cut someone off. Maybe you do the opposite. You confront them. You throw fits. You scream at them. You cry. You hound them. You talk about them behind their back. You talk to them. You talk to other people about them. All of that is a strategy. And it's tempting for us whenever we're in our right frame of mind, when we're not under the influence of these emotions. It's tempting for us to say, well, this is bad and this is good. You should do this, but you shouldn't do this. This is appropriate and this is not appropriate. And then we judge other people and ourselves according to that. And I've been on both sides of this. On the one hand, I've been the person throwing fits, storming off, crying. I've done that part. And on the other hand, I've observed other people doing that and had the same judgment for them. And I think the reality is there is no right way. There isn't, because it is such a crapshoot when it comes to the situation and the intricacies of what's involved. Sometimes it's very appropriate for where you're at and where that person's at and your dynamic. It's very appropriate to just disconnect and say, no, I don't want to have any interaction with this person. It's not in my best interest. And other times, it's better to do the opposite. It's better to reconcile and continue the friendship, continue the relationship in some form. And I think the most important question to ask, in whatever form you can ask it, because of course when the emotions are running high, you might not even be able to address this question at that moment. But the question is, what can bring me back to feeling empowered? So thinking about like when you're feeling at your best, when you're feeling like the hot stuff that you want to be, you feel like you look good, you feel confident. Just think of a night or an event where you really felt that. You felt that you were truly yourself and you were at your best and people really accepted you and you felt like you were powerful. So that feeling, the question is, what can bring us back to that feeling as quickly as possible, as directly, as efficiently as possible? I started asking that question long time ago, and I still ask that question, and I've gotten better at monitoring my emotions. That's really helped. So it is a skill that has to be built. At first when you ask that, it's like, wow, it feels good is to call that person and cuss them out. But really, of all the strategies, I think very rarely an emotional outburst on Facebook or at the Malanga that goes with a lot of tears and name calling and accusation. Most of the time, those strategies don't contribute to you feeling empowered. They just make one feel weaker and more out of control, because we're desperate. And that feeling of desperateness, like once you get there, that feeling of desperate, that sort of pushes you to send that text or to call them one more time or to reach out and argue this one point, and you just want to call them and you want to tell them, like, actually what you meant was this. You know, that desperateness, it never really leads you to the feeling of power. It just leads you to feeling more desperate, because the more you feel it, the more you feel it. Like, that's kind of, I mean, that's a truth about emotions anyway. It's like, once you start feeling sad and you sort of feel sad and continue feeling sad, like the sadness will persist. It won't shift until you decide, or until something happens to interrupt it. And, you know, one thing that's really good to have, no matter what strategy you're taking, by the way, and no matter what sort of breakup you're going through, is to have good friends around you who can help intervene. So they can be the ones to say, you know, don't call them, don't send that text, read it to me instead. I have to do that sometimes, like when I'm really having a hard time. And I've talked about this before, that, you know, whenever I get really upset at someone, the first thing I do is I write in my notes, I write them a letter, like the most emotionally charged letter I can fathom, you know, everything I think about that person. And then by the end of it, I just kind of, I'm too exhausted to actually send it. So, and another thing I do sometimes whenever I'm trying to walk myself off the ledge of taking an action is to imagine the result of something. Like, imagine the best result that you could possibly have, and actually ask yourself if that would be satisfying to you. And a lot of times it's not, because the damage is done, the pain is there. So even if that person admits to all of their faults and they say that you were right and they apologize and all of this stuff, like, it's not really going to resolve the actual pain that's happening. So in that situation, when you ask yourself, where is this going to take me towards or away from my personal empowerment, that can give you some clarity on whether it's appropriate or not to act out in a certain way. Sometimes it totally is, right? Sometimes, that's what I'm saying, it's not clear cut, because I can imagine some of you are listening to me and going, well, yeah, that's true, but this one time that this thing happened to me, you know, is different. And it's like, yeah, that's why you have to keep asking that question in every situation. And every time it happens, you learn a little bit more. So I'll tell you a very frequent, not frequent, but somewhat common thing for me to experience is this experience of connecting with someone deeply on a friendship level, and then our friendship sort of fizzles out. And that's happened several times. And the first time it happened, I was heartbroken. I mean, I felt so let down. I felt like I can't keep any friends. It's because I'm an immigrant and I didn't grow up in one place and I don't have skills to keep friendships. This is what I thought about myself, you know, and that's like the reflection, right? It's like the moment that happened, what I thought about myself was a good indicator of just my own self-worth. So I really believed I was broken somehow and that I was not capable of keeping friendships. But then, once it happened a few times, I sort of was like, oh, okay. Maybe it's not just me. I mean, I'm sure I'm contributing. I'm not. Sometimes I'm not an easy person to be friends with. Like, I'll admit, I can be a certain B word from time to time, and I'm pretty demanding when it comes to friendships in certain ways. So I'm sure I contribute, but I also began to understand it in a form of using the relationship as a way to understand life itself, because guess what? We change. And I think that's the thing we forget when we make friends with someone or we get into a romantic relationship. There's this illusion that this person is like this and they're going to be like this and it's going to be like this forever, right? And we think that, and then somebody will say, well, things change. Well, and we'll be like, yeah, of course they change for the better. It's just going to get better from here because it's already so good this way. The reality is people change. We change. So some of the friendships that have sort of evaporated in my life, one question I ask is at the time that we sort of break up, at that time, I ask myself, if I being who I am right now and knowing what I know right now, met this person, would I be friends with them right now? Would I be as intimate? Would I be as attracted to them? And a lot of times the answer is no, which is an indicator to me that, well, things have changed. I have changed. That person has changed. And maybe I have a judgment about how they've changed, and I might say, oh, well, they changed and it's their fault that we're not friends. But I understand also that they can say the same thing about me. And that's the reality of it. That's the truth. It's true that we change. If you're in tango or you are in a community like that, some sort of social dance or activity that exposes you to people in this way, you start kind of learning that no, actually, this is just part of a natural cycle, and people come in and out of your life for a reason. They come in and they serve their purpose, perhaps. They share their gifts, you share your gifts with them, and then the journey is done and it kind of moves on and things evolve. And it takes time to arrive at that mindset. So for me, now after 13 years of dancing tango, I can see certain things in a different way, and I can manage my own emotions in a different way, and things affect me differently, and I have very different strategies now than I did before. Whereas for other people, the strategies might vary depending on their experiences and their even experience with these emotions and maturity when it comes to these emotions. So I would say my advice in whatever situation you're going through, will go through, or went through, is number one, ask the question, where does the powerful you lie? Which decisions help you get there? Which makes you feel more powerful? You know, and my avatar for a powerful woman is Beatrix Kiddo from Kill Bill. If you've seen Kill Bill, the Uma Thurman character who goes on a murderous rampage to avenge the death of her daughter. To me, that has become the avatar that I think of. It might be something more gentle for you, but that character really grabbed my imagination years ago. So I just think of Beatrix Kiddo and what would she do in this situation, and what would make her more powerful, and what would that translate to? What kinds of decisions would I make from that place if I were to feel that powerful? So that's one thing I recommend. The second thing is that you really don't do this in isolation, and find people to talk to and share this experience with. Somebody that you trust, somebody who can represent your rational, balanced self. There were people along the way who really helped me, and who protected me, and who helped me process those emotions, people I could really rely on. So I highly recommend that you develop some friendships like that. I think all of us on a regular basis just need a community of people who can understand these issues and who can be there to hear us out and just say, hey, yeah, I've been through this too. Don't worry. It's not the end of the world, right? Like, we just need somebody to tell us that. And that's actually, why I started the Facebook group, and why I'm keeping it is for that purpose. So another little plug for my Facebook group. Finally, I wanted to actually share a few key words that stood out to me from some of the conversations we had on this topic within the group. And it was so great to see the range of insights and experiences and how people deal with them. And being a woman, of course, I'm always thinking about how to be more empowered as a woman, how to reach the next level of empowerment and overcome limiting beliefs that we women inherit from past generations, or we grow up into in our culture. And this is the time to really deal with those. And tango is a great avenue for diving into these questions. So I wrote down some words that spoke to me of the kind of strength that we want to learn to embody. And honestly, that kind of strength does not develop unless we go through these kinds of experiences. So if there's anything that might help you, it might be useful to think of these experiences as a way of developing that inner strength and becoming a stronger woman, or becoming a stronger man, and owning your power more. So there was a post, I believe it was by Mariana, and she said firmness, self-control, healthy, constructive self-protection. And I kind of love all of those words. Firmness, self-control, healthy, constructive self-protection. It sounds very serious, I know, but I think I like the idea of us as people, as dancers, having that kind of power, that we can access our firmness when we need it, that we can have self-control. And self-control doesn't mean that we don't express our emotions or that we're somehow zombies and we don't show any feeling. Self-control just means that we're in control of what we do, that if we choose to act out dramatically or not, that it comes from a place of choice rather than from a reflex and a sort of that kind of whiplash reaction to emotions. And then this idea of self-protection. I do think that self-protection is more applicable as a concept for women than men. Because, one of the reasons, is because we are on the receiving end. The structure of tango itself dictates that. We are on the receiving end. We are the ones who are being invited, and we choose how to proceed with that invitation. And so this idea that from the very start that we see ourselves as responsible for protecting ourselves, for having healthy boundaries, for being constructive about this. Not that we're trying to, I'm going to protect myself so nobody hurts me, but more like that we understand the boundaries that we need to be healthy in ourselves psychologically and socially, And all of that, all of these words to me boil down to this thing that I called having a backbone. That phrase, he has no backbone, she has no backbone. And the idea of that backbone has been sort of a peripheral idea for me for a long time, and I've always sort of have that word and that concept floating in my mind of having a backbone, that whatever separation, breakup, pain of that process, whatever we're dealing with, that we have a backbone, and that backbone is our strategies that we learn over time. It's the process of asking ourselves, what is serving me to get back to my power? That's our backbone. And we all need it. Men need it as much as women. For men, it's a little different. It is. And I think I will do an episode just on that, what is it like for men versus women? And because I know that men have a different set of challenges. But I guess today's episode is a bit more connected with women because I'm sort of speaking from my own personal experience and some of the things that women are more commonly expressing to me that they have, in terms of breakups and heartbreaks and separation and how to deal with that. So choose wisely what you want to do. There is no wrong strategy. You can choose to ignore the person and never speak to them again and go to the milonga and pretend that they don't exist. You can do that. You can acknowledge their presence and say hello, but not dance with them. Or you can dance with them. Or you can move to a different country and change your name. Really, all of those are available. And talk to your friends to see which strategy is best for you in this moment in your life. And seek advice from people that you trust, who are themselves exhibiting qualities that you want to develop in yourself, perhaps. And I think that over time, we all can have a better strategy as a community for dealing with situations like that. And in that way, every individual win, every individual who can access that level of empowerment to process something like that, every time that happens, that benefits the community, and the community grows stronger as a whole. And I think we forget how much we depend on a community staying healthy. Because just think, and I know you have examples of this because it happens in every single community. Think of a recent scandal, a breakup, a dramatic conflict between people that ends up dividing the community and creating more drama, and it overflows onto Facebook and social media, and it just does not serve anyone. So when you individually make it a goal to become empowered, to handle your emotions, to have self-control, to keep people accountable, to keep yourself accountable, then that helps the whole community, and you serve as an example to others. You encourage and inspire others to do the same, and I think we can all benefit from that. So, all right. I think I've said my piece on this topic. I'm sure I can go on and talk more, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So reach out to me with some stories and insights that you're having. I love hearing from you. You can reach me on social media at I'm So Tango, or email me at connect@imsotango.com. Don't forget to check out my free seminar that's coming up next week, and I will